Hey, Barb.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Hello.
Good, Chip. How you doing, man?
Good.
Hey, John Ferris, it's been a very long time.
Paul, you really look serious. Shuckster.
I'm doing a lot of thinking, Michael.
Oh, geez. I'll be looking for smoke.
Yeah,
Hello, Purple.
it'll be a trash fire, Mike.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to HOSR's 50 Years Story Hour. My name is Jen Wesson. I'm the Executive Director of the Head of the Schuylkill Regatta, and on behalf of the Board of Directors and the Committee 50, we welcome you to our 9th Story Hour. We are excited to welcome and hear from a number of high school coaches and folks that have supported high school rowing over the years. Our goal of this evening is to share and record the stories of the high school rowing programs, old and new, their traditions, their growth, and the challenges that they've overcome, and the ones that they still face today. So we expect a lively conversation among friends here, and we're really happy that you could all join us this evening. So just a very small intro into the kind of the genesis of these story hours. We wanted to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Head of the Schuylkill Regatta by putting together stories of legendary competitors and crews and teams and coaches that kind of happened over the last 50 years. And then we started this story hour during that virtual regatta in 2020, and there was just such a lovely feedback that we received, and folks really just had a great time connecting on this level, and being able to share stories, and to us being able to record these stories meant a lot for appreciation for those that came before, and to pass those stories down. So just a few housekeeping items. The format of the program will likely run till about 8 o'clock, maybe a little after. I will turn it over to our facilitator. He'll give us a little history, and then delve into some questions with our coaches, who we call storytellers. If anybody wants to chime in, you can raise your hand, use the little emoji, or you can write in the chat room at any point in time. You know, the point of this kind of platform where we can see one another is so we can kind of all join in the conversation. We'll put a little bit of control on it. We're going to keep everybody muted. But if you really want to jump in, please do so. And I will also, at the end, the last 15, 20 minutes or so, we'll open it up to questions, and people can unmute themselves and jump in there as well. All right, so just a reminder, this is being recorded. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Mike Chipollone, our facilitator this evening. It really does not need an introduction, but you know him well in our Philadelphia community, and current member of Fairmount and Penn AC. Pretty much steers a boat for UBC and anyone else that is lucky to have him. He's also an HOSR board member, and we are superbly lucky to have him. So Mike, I will turn it over to you.
Good evening. Thank you, Jennifer. So, Dottie, I'm going to start out with a little history of rowing. Please excuse any major mistakes I make. And if you see anything totally major, let me know, would you? But the history, by the way, and welcome everybody. So I'm just going to give a brief history of schoolboy and schoolgirl rowing in Philadelphia. And it dates back into the 1890s. And it starts out with a man named Ellis Ward, who was the coach at the University of Pennsylvania, and he imagined that if he had a whole cadre of people who knew how to row, and he could get them to come to the University of Pennsylvania, he would not have to teach them how to row. So, and I see Joan Scholl down there. Joan, good evening. So anyhow, Joan been a referee for a long time. I know that. So tonight, after we get finished with this introduction, we're going to speak to several coaches. So Coach Ward gets schoolboy rowing in Philadelphia. The first race was, I forget whether it was 3 or 4 crews, but it was, we had Penn Charter, we had Central Technical High School, and we had Northeast Technical High School. And we also had Roman Catholic High School. So that was the original 1997 face-off. We have some, first thing we have is a little clip of what Coach Ellis Ward was looking for. And so here's what he was demonstrating, is the technique that was used in those days. So the water looks like it's pretty rough. The waves are over the guys' heads, but you'll notice that it was much more back rowing then. So after that first race in 1997, between there and 1920, the history of rowing was pretty sporadic. It came and it went. In 1920, the man who was the superintendent of schools in Philadelphia announced that rowing was too expensive for the school district to do. And they also had a study that was presuming that people under the age of 18 could be injured by rowing. So they withdrew the public schools from Philly rowing. And it took a while to get going again. So in the mid 1920s, we had 5 or 6 crews going. So among them, we had Episcopal Academy, Germantown Friends, Roman again, LaSalle joined in, St. Joe's joined in, and West Catholic joined in. So I may have missed one crew there, and I can't remember who the heck it is. But this is the way things got going. So the league, so to speak, the crews were emulating what was happening in England. So they thought it would be a great idea if we could get competitive with England. So the way the league format was set up in those days, you either rode on Tuesdays or Thursdays. And when you rode against one other boat, and that was it. And that was how they determined, they kept score, and they were able to come up with some kind of a winner at the end of the year. So this stayed like that for the next 40 to 50 years. In 1929, the Stotesbury Cup regatta came on, and we have a little clip of that. And West Catholic was the first winners of the Stoats, and they actually went on to win the first 7 of the Stotesbury Cup races. They won 7 out of the 9 first races. And out of this West Catholic crew and some of the other crews from Philly, they actually formed crews that could go race internationally, including the 1930 Penn AC Big Eight, which was the world champions. So flashing forward, more crews get to join the league. We move up a little further and we have the Hereford School now rowing. And we've got, I got a picture yesterday from John Stephanik of his first boat, the 1942 Haverford crew. So this is what they look like in 42. And Hereford, I believe, won the nationals that year. Was that correct, John?
Yeah, I did a little more digging. That's the 42 varsity 8. The first year they actually joined was 1938. So yeah, but that's the 1942 crew.
At volume's a little bit low.
Sorry about that. This is
Okay. Well, no problem. So we go through World War II. We come into the 50s, and now more crews start to be added. And it was primarily, though, either private schools in Philadelphia or Catholic schools in Philadelphia were the main cog in the wheel. The progress keeps going ahead until we get to about 1960, when a tavern owner from Drexel Hill, whose son had won the regatta, they didn't get a prize. They didn't get a trophy. So he said, well, that's not right. Somebody should get a prize out of this. And the guy's name was Emanuel Flick. And so he was the man who donated the Manny Flick Trophy. Things progressed as they were with 2-on-2 racing to decide who the champs were until about 1980, when Matt Ledwith became the president of PSRA, and Dr. Horvath was his assistant. So they instituted 6-lane racing. So that's the advent of the Flick as we know it today. But one other thing happened on the way. 1974 and 1975, we had the Baldwin School rowing and racing in the Manny Flick Regatta. So I guess people noticed it because the following year, 1976, they decided to put women in the Olympics for rowing too. So Philadelphia leads the way in that case. So we go forward. We've got Dr. Horvath was trying to get more sculling going. So he was a prime advocate of sculling. And so in 1985, they incorporated, they called it the Flick Horvath series. And it has just been growing ever since. It's a wonderful thing with the advent of the girls, for sure. They really add so much to the rowing. And we go from the transition from Matt Ledwith to Paul Horvath. And today we have Leslie Pfeil, who is the president of the Philadelphia Scholastic Rowing Association. So Leslie was telling me the other day that last week, which was the 4th Flick, these are league races, by the way, folks. And if you've ever been here for a Flick, you know what we're talking about. They had 411 crews actually compete. And the weather last Sunday was pretty bad here in Philly. So next week is the 5th and last Flick, which Leslie tells me they're expecting more than 500 entries. So then we go from there to the cities, and we go after that a couple weeks later to the Stoats. So that's a thumbnail history of rowing in Philly. And let's talk a little bit to people who are here to give us their views and tell us a little bit about what's going on. So first we got we've got Amy Beckman, who is the boys freshman coach at Lower Merion High School, freshman and novice. So Amy, good evening.
Hi.
Hi,
Um,
and you know what I wanted you to tell us a little bit about some of the issues you're facing with dealing with the kids as far as attendance and commitment to duty.
well, I'm going to start with actually explaining that Lower Merion, which is a public high school, established their team in 1945. So as a public high school, that was pretty amazing. It was interesting. I was doing some history. I was informed a while back, which I hadn't known for years, that girls were finally allowed to row in 1975. But in 1975, they only had a coxswain on the a girl coxswain for the boys. I later did a little bit more research, and it turned out to be, it was closer to 1978 that girls were really rowing for Lower Merion. I started with Lower Merion in 1980. The challenges we're seeing on our team right now, I think a lot of it relates to COVID, and there's a lot. There are a lot of levels. I think that my frustration right now is that I have, it's wonderful. I went from having one freshman boy last year to having 22 kids this year. I have 5 11th grade boys that are novices. I have 4 10th grade boys, and then I have the rest are freshmen. So it's a very big group. It's a very wide range of ages. And a lot of the kids are very overscheduled. There's a lot of pressure, I think, especially in our community, that kids they can't do just one sport. And it's putting so much pressure on kids. And it's when they run into something like rowing, which they've never done before, it's a big wake up. I've spent so much time trying to explain it to parents that you can't just come and go, that I have boats for exactly 2 8s and a 4. And if one person is missing, everything kind of goes, domino effect. And trying to explain that to 22 kids and 22 sets of parents and guardians, it's a lot. It's a big difference. I think that it's interesting with, I think back to when I was at Lower Merion and rowing and completely clueless, didn't know what was going on in the world, didn't know what was going on anywhere. I just did what I was told, and I tried to do the best at it. I remember being so scared of being cut. We don't do cuts anymore, but being so scared of being cut and seeing the list and making the list, and how that's changed. And as little as we had as far as being able to communicate with each other other than just talking to each other, we still got things done, and we showed up and we didn't question it. Where now we have all these different avenues of information coming at us, and nobody seems to be reading emails. Nobody seems to be reading messages. And it's just a lot of repeating, which is unfortunate. But I did manage to get 22 kids on the water all at the same time last weekend, which was a small miracle, and they all did very well. So I'm happy for them. It's just, it's a lot more energy.
Thanks. Let's see. Hey, Phil, what kind of issues are you running into today? Like even compared to 5 years ago or 10 years ago, are you dealing with the same guys that you used to deal with before?
No, it's certainly not. Can you hear me okay?
No,
No. Well, you
I
probably
can't
don't
hear
wanna-
anyhow.
You don't want to hear me anyway.
I do.
No, you don't. Well, you heard that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, I can hear Phil very well.
That's all that
Yeah, I
matters.
could hear.
Okay.
Okay. The issues are, that the students have changed, the parents have changed. They come if they want to come. If they have something else that they want to do, that's what they're going to do. And you just have to adapt. You have to be able to go along with the flow of that. And I don't know about be understanding because of the age of me and, some of the people that, help, well, not one of the people that helped me out, but otherwise it's kind of difficult because you're used to people showing up and being responsible and let's all go and when you're in this together, don't miss practice. Your teammates are counting on you. A lot of that is not, present anymore. It's just not the way a lot of them are used to doing things. They're used to, I think, if you want to come to Little League and you only want to come one night and then just show up for the game, that's good. We're happy to see you and we'll put you in the game. And where do you want to play? We'll put you in there. And a lot of the parents buy into that. I think, that's the way they would like it to be. On a side note, I must tell you, just in the people that I can see on this screen, I'm seeing some of the best coaches that there are in junior and high school rowing at all. I would like to single a couple people out, but I probably should not because I'll overlook somebody that I don't know. But I think there's a lot of really good people here.
Well, go ahead, Bill. You can single somebody out or
Well,
a couple people.
Well, just so you know, I'd single out Gabby, but I don't know if I'd single you out.
I agree with you. So, hey, John, I got a question for you. You came into a situation following a coach who had been at your school for quite a few years. How do you deal with that situation? And why don't you give us a little history of Jim Barker, your previous coach at Hereford?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for letting me be here. One, because I heard Molly was going to be on here, so I had to be on here because she's the one that started me in coaching here in Philadelphia. So thank you for that. But it's funny when Jim Barker comes out, everyone's like, "Oh, you have big shoes to fill," or how do you take his place? And I never thought of it that way. I always thought of it is that I had to embrace the history of what Jim Barker was and what he started and kind of everything that he developed and grew, not only just at Haverford, but in the Philadelphia area. I mean, we were in England in 2017 and I would walk around with Haverford gear on and everyone would ask about Jim Barker because everyone knew about him and he's known around the world and as a rower and a coach. So I never thought of it about the pressures or anything about like what I had to do to like fill those shoes, but more to take on that history and learn from it and kind of continue to develop and continue to think about how he did things and continue to integrate some of the stuff that many of his alumni and many of the people that were involved in getting me here at Haverford School to kind of continue. There's certain things like Jim was always about camaraderie and community and giving back and things like that within the group. And that was something that I really tried to instill, not only in my style, but also in my coaching and in dealing with a lot of different people at the school and within the program and with alumni. And it's just really taken off. But in regards to just being with Jim, I mean, he was there for almost 50 years. He took a little bit of break to focus on some rowing. But I'm now working and talking with guys from the 70s and late 60s that coached with Jim after they were done rowing and getting stories. And it's just an enormous amount of history that has helped me learn more about the program and not only help me learn about Philadelphia rowing, but also know what it is to be a coach here in the area and kind of help out and be part of things. But Jim, like I said, Jim, I'm never going to replace him or fill those shoes, but I'm going to do my best to help Haverford School Rowing continue and hopefully be successful in the different methods that we're going out there and trying to compete in.
Thanks, John. So, hey, quick question for you. Do you find that your guys have the commitment you're expecting from them?
mean, probably many coaches on here can understand, like, these kids are being pulled in so many different directions these days and being told so many different things from different people. If I can get all my boats to show up every day, it's a good day. So it's hard to kind of track everything down, especially when all of our teams are off campus and we don't have that opportunity to track, like, be on campus and go find them if they're not going to be showing up at the river. But I think the biggest thing is just trying to continue that communication, making sure they know what their expectations are, their goals are, and hopefully they're on the same page as the coaches and the coaching staff, and they're going to show up and try their best.
Thanks, John.
Sure.
Hey, Mike, I just wanted to interject a question for Jonathan, because I know Mike had told me that in your conversation with him that you specifically talked to your rowers about the heritage and the tradition of the program.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. And so I was just wondering, because coaches have 1,000 things, right, to get across to their students in the time that they have them. How do you do it? How do you convey that tradition and what the history that they're part of?
Yeah, I treat it as a history lesson pretty much. So when we get done with the flicks, which some people are all on board and take extremely seriously, we gear up for city championships, and probably we have team dinners before, like, city championships and Stotesbury's and then nationals. And I make sure that these guys know, like, this is our history. This is how many times we've won this race. This is how many times we've been here at this level, and we're expected to do this way, to be this way and act a certain way. And hopefully we're going out there and trying to win. And I think that's a way just to kind of a wake up call for these kids that might not realize, like, okay, we're walking into a almost brand new boathouse with some new boats and things like this. We don't realize the struggles that some of the other teams might have or people in the past have had. And it's just one of those things that they need to understand the history and why every day when that boat hits the water, we need to focus in and we need to be ready to work hard, so that when we get out there and we get a chance to race some of these really good teams that are in Philadelphia, we can go out there and do our best.
That's great.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.
So, hey, Jen, that was a good question, by the way. So, anyway, Molly, you were explaining to me about how, as a coach, you wear different hats. And what do you feel your obligations are to your crews?
I think it's really important for crews to understand that our sport is just such a team sport. And as the coach, and I also teach these kids at school Latin, so in loco parentis, I take that on pretty seriously. I talk to them about respect for the other people on the team, respect for their competition. We are one of the few sports in the world that when you go out to practice, we're looking at people we row against on Sunday, right? So we're out there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, watching our competition. I'm sure any football coach or any lacrosse coach would love to have that opportunity, but we also have to realize and respect what's going on the river and respect the history of the river. We see the kids for 2 hours a day. No teacher in a school sees kids for 2 hours a day usually. And lots of parents don't see kids for 2 hours a day because, as John said, they're pulled in 5 million different directions. They go from our practice to another practice and then to their personal trainer or their, tutor for something. And so we actually see them more than lots of adults that they have in their lives. And we see their ups, we see their downs, we see them at their best, and we see them at their worst. And being the adult, I feel it's really important for me to be able to say to them what's appropriate what people are expecting them to do. And as John said, to understand the heritage, to understand the responsibility, to understand the privilege they have. When our school moved in 2008, I made a conscious decision to stay on Boathouse Row. And part of that was the history. It's, you know, I get to bring these kids, some of whom I'm not quite sure they even know there's a city near them, into a city every single day and see the history of those boathouses. And, you know, I'm sure they've driven by in a quick little car on Kelly Drive. But they don't really understand it until they walk in to Boathouse Row and they see the flicks. The parents are always amazed at that first flick that their child rows in when they go down there, and there's not a parking space to be had, and there's millions of people, and they're thinking, how has this been kept in secret for all these years? And it's, you know, I feel really strongly that that's a responsibility of a coach, to open kids' eyes and yet to give them the parameters, not only in rowing, but in life. I mean, I've had lots of parents say to me, you had more of an impact on my child when they were a teenager than we could ever have, because they didn't listen to us. So knowing that sometimes kids listen to us, it's a responsibility as an adult to make sure that, you know, they're getting the benefit of an adult listening to them and guiding them through their adolescence.
And Molly, you had told me that you teach your kids to be kind.
I do. I, you know, when we send them out for a race, I say to them, no matter what happens, you have to be gracious out there. You have to be gracious. You have to respect the people who are rowing in boats. They could be the slowest boat in the world, but if they're not in your race, then you're racing no one. So you have to respect them. And, you know, everyone wants to win. And, you know, we all know it's great to win, right? Everyone's happy. Winning is easy. It's an easy time to coach. But when kids don't feel that they've raced as well as they can, or they've disappointed you as a coach, that's a really hard time. And I want our kids to realize that, you know, when they're in the you know, glory of winning, there's lots of other crews that have just had their hearts broken. And, you know, that makes you a better winner, I think.
Very nice. Very good. So, you know, I see a lot of referees out here tonight too. And you know, rowing in the spring is tough. And I want to thank you men and women who come down and spend all that time on the water on Sundays where there's no colder place than a launch. I'd rather be sitting in a boat any day of the week, in a racing boat any day of the week as a coxswain, just sitting back in there. It's much warmer than riding in a launch. And to the refs, thank you folks, and I respect you. So, and Molly, that's very good comments about being polite and courteous, because if we don't, you know, so many things that kids learn come from their coaches. And the way you expressed it is great. I know, Phil, you spend a lot of time with your kids, driving them down here on the bus and driving them back. It is really good. And I'll tell you the truth, I don't think I was ever disrespected by a father judge guy. They're usually very attentive when you speak to them. So they must be getting some good training somewhere. So anyhow, does anybody have any questions for our Rich? Rich Duger, you can go ahead.
Yeah, just I just want to follow up what Molly was saying. I've had the good fortune to be on the river doing PSRA stuff since 2001. And I have to say that my experience with the young athletes that come down to the river and the what the coaches impart to these young athletes, the decorum, the way they handle themselves is probably second to none. As I look over, and I've had a chance to referee across the country, I see this as really something very special to have all these schools concentrated in one place and to have the degree of skill that the coaches bring to the table each and every week. We're fortunate to have the PSRA series and allow these kids to compete against one another up to the city championships and the scholastic nationals, whatnot. But it is really something special. I don't think we all appreciate as much that this is a very special place for rowing in the country. And we have a lot of course, we have a lot of referees that help make this possible and show up every week. As Mike, as you point out, we run about 22 referees every week to try to keep the venue safe and fair for everybody. And it's really something I think to very much appreciate.
Mike, I
Thank
see
you, Rick.
Leslie Pfeil on board tonight. You could maybe turn to Leslie.
Yes. So Leslie, welcome and good evening. So you're expecting a big group coming in this week?
Yes, so yeah, this is the fourth one this week, and we have over 500 entries. It's not, we've had that before. We usually have the fourth and fifth are well into the 500s. I've really enjoyed listening to the coaches, all of whom I know personally, because I try to be a coach's advocate, even though they may not always see it that way from their perspective. But what many people don't realize about high school coaches is most of them have other jobs, full-time jobs, in addition to their coaching job. And they all have families. So they work at their job all day and then they go coach a bunch of kids in the afternoon and spend their weekends with those kids. And they do this certainly all spring, many of them in the fall and in winter with winter training as well. So it's really a calling, and it's really something that requires a great deal of dedication, not just to the sport of rowing, but to kids, because that's what the PSRA is really all about. It's about rowing, but it's really about developing young people, not just as athletes, but as people, as good citizens. And that's what Molly was saying. That's what John was saying. And I also hear, Amy and Phil, what they said is very common these days. The kids are, drawn in so many different directions, trying to do so many things. And it's very hard to get that full-time attention and commitment from them. It's a challenge for all coaches. So, that it really is. And someone once said, kids will remember who their coach is. They won't necessarily remember who their algebra teacher was, but they'll always remember who the coach was, because they do have a great impact on the kids. And so they're very important people, and I commend them for what they do. I think that what I get out of this myself personally is to see so many kids come to the flicks, because the flicks are unique because they're really big scrimmages. And what we try to offer with the flicks is allow coaches and teams to try different things, different lineups, different boats, different entries. I'm going to do this week, and then I'm going to do that this week, and some people say, oh, you're all over the place, but that's the whole point. The point is to try, different things, and you have a sort of a ground to experiment in before you do hit, the big medal races, before we hit city championships, Stotesbury and so on. You'll have a chance to try a few things. And I think that's what helps a lot of our crews. And that's why they're so successful, because they can kind of have, a really fancy practice at the Flicks. So that's, that's my perspective on that. So.
Thank you, Leslie.
Well,
Leslie,
thanks, Dottie.
Leslie,
Go ahead.
can you talk about the changes that you've seen over the years in the growth of the PSRA? And then I just wanted to say also thank you to you. I mean, the coaches on this call are amazing, and I think we often forget though the line of folks that are supporting those coaches or just supporting our rowers in lots of different ways that make all of this come together, because we know it's not easy getting boats on the water.
It's great. How the growth, yes, the sport has really grown, and it's had its ups and downs. I think the biggest challenge for a lot of teams is affordability, and because you have to have access to the water, which means you have to have a place, have to belong to a boathouse, that's just to begin with, and then you need equipment, and if you travel, or entry fees, uniforms and all the usual things. But I think affordability is hard. So I've seen some teams over the years, fold, unfortunately, because they just couldn't keep it up. They just couldn't keep it going. And COVID really affected almost everyone. I think that those years that we were down, a few things happened. Some teams couldn't even practice, never mind compete. They couldn't, all meet together, certainly during the early times when everything was virtual. But even after that, I know teams had to share, well, we can't be all at the boathouse at the same time. So maybe half the team practices for 2 days and the other half practices for another 2 days. And I can tell you the PSRA, we rolled over everybody's dues after 2020, but even after 2021, I had teams in 21 that said, we're still not ready. We're just not ready to come back. And even this year, there's a few that are just starting up again. So I think that, what happened is it was a big setback, but in spite of that, the sport is persevering. High school rowing is persevering. There's more and more teams. And one thing I'm really kind of proud of Philly is how much sculling we do. I know when my kids were rowing back in the 90s, very few sculling teams. Almost everybody was sweep rowing, which is fine, and then it started to grow. And I think we now have as many sculling entries as we have sweep entries, and many teams do both. And I hear a lot, you hear a lot about, we're trying to, from US Rowing or other organizations, we really want to promote sculling. But frankly, I think we're doing the best job. And I don't mean me, I mean like we, the coaches and the PSRA, because sculling has really taken off in Philadelphia youth rowing. And I just think it's the greatest thing for kids, so I'm very proud that we've been able to be at the forefront of that. Teams, what I do see a trend among teams, I do see smaller teams. I think that it's just harder for coaches now to keep, a large team together. And we've seen a lot of the teams we've known for many, many years shrink in size. Some of that is enrollment issues, but some of it, is just, like I said, affordability, and the kids have too many activities and can't commit. But I think, so I see more teams, but smaller teams. And we also have a lot of what we sort of lovingly call orphans. That is kids whose schools do not have a team, but they learn to row somehow, or they signed up at a club, but they want to compete in a high school regatta with other high school kids. So we let them join as single or even doubles sometimes. And so we have 87 teams in the Flicks this coming weekend, but 80, a lot of them, 10 of them easily are singles or doubles, kids who just, have one or two kids on their so-called team. And all they have to do is get permission from the principal to say you can represent the school, and then you're in, so tell it, prove that you can swim. So that's so we have a lot of that. And sometimes I've been told, well, why are you bothering with these kids? Because they take up a lot of my time administratively, but the whole idea is to promote the sport and to give kids more opportunity. And that's another thing I'm kind of proud of, that we've able to give opportunity to those kids who probably wouldn't have, competitive opportunities, if they didn't have an organization like ours to participate in.
So, yeah, Alan.
Thank you, Les. Thank you, Leslie. Were you calling on Alan, Mike?
Yeah. He's muted.
But when he's out, as he's figuring how to unmute, I think that Leslie, it's really good points that you made, and I think
There he goes.
one of the things that we were talking about prior to the story hour was, you know, we often have a lot of masters rowers on these calls, and I think being inside of a boathouse where high schools row out of, you know, how can adult masters rowers who aren't necessarily coaches, you know, how can they support these programs in a bigger and better way? Like, I think oftentimes, you know, they're throwing up challenges more often than assisting. So, you know, just would it be helpful to have them engage more with the high school programs, and maybe there's lots of there are programs out there that are doing that well, and maybe some that could you know, use that assistance, and coaches, you know, again, that are doing 1,000 things, you know, what is it that you could, you know, that would really lend a hand to you and your program, you know, from maybe a boathouse that you're, you know, that is hosting you, or that you're a tenant of.
I can recommend a couple of things. First of all, thank you, Masters, for coexisting with teenagers in your boathouse. So, but I think there's a few things. If you are at a boathouse, you know, and almost all the boathouses, I think, have high school teams. You know, a lot of times coaches are so busy, like I said, you know, with their regular lives, and then being on the water and training the kids. And there's a certain amount of paperwork and administrative stuff that they all hate to do. And I'm sure some of them might like help with that, which isn't, you know, that's not too burdensome to someone, you know. And if you don't want to be a coach yourself, you could certainly help them, you know, with some of their administrative tasks. And the PSRA needs volunteers. I have to tell you, the Great Resignation hit our volunteer corps over the past 2 years. And what I really try to do is, we have a volunteer requirement. So a lot of the parents, you know, come for half a day, and, you know, they're a flag man or whatever. But we have an LOC of people who sort of manage different areas. And Jen, you know, running a huge regatta like head of the Schuylkill, you have to have a lot of, not one person can run everything. You know, you have to delegate certain areas. And I try to find areas that people like or have skills for, so they can sort of take those areas over. And, you know, everybody has certain skills that they can apply to that. Like, gee, I really, you know, want to help with things on the water, or I'd really like to help with organization, or I'd help with this or that, you know, or manage a finish tower. You know, I have a fellow right now who's a judge from Delaware who organizes all the tent spaces for parents. I mean, it's a crazy job, but he does that, you know. So there's always, you know, jobs like that. And we try to find jobs that people like and have skills for. So if anyone ever wants to do that, I'm welcome. I'll welcome you. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Leslie.
Leslie, that was very good. So Amy, you were saying Lower Merion needs another boathouse. And, what are they doing about
it? We have been in conversation with the neighborhood, and the conversation has not gone well. There are a few who are not very happy about it and have been very outspoken. So we've found another location a little bit further away, and we are just trying to work with the community, because this would be such an incredibly positive, impactful situation. Right now, Hareton, our other school, Lower Merion School District, is struggling because they're losing their home, which was not the greatest to begin with. They don't have running water. We feel very fortunate that we do, and we love it at Hines, but we've outgrown it. We have over 90 kids on our team, and we are expanding, our coaching to, again, we introduced sculling into our program again very strongly through COVID. My husband had the foresight to start buying as many singles as he could so we could continue to teach kids. We want to teach kids, that maybe, aren't necessarily at Lower Merion or Hareton, or even adults who are in our community who are looking for some other family to join, because I think there are a lot of very lonely people out there. And I think that one of the things I talk to our kids about is how, this is your second family. These are people you will be somehow connected to for the rest of your life. I'll be like, look around, see these guys all here? You're going to remember their names and you're going to remember stories about them when you're old like me. And you're going to have those stories and keep them close to your heart. And, now that we have Facebook, you might even be able to connect with them. And, I try to emphasize that, but trying to get a boathouse would allow us to expand what we're trying to do to continue to provide, an outlet for people of all ages and to actually grow our team. Did I stop too soon?
John, Mike, want me to ask my question?
Go ahead, Al.
Good. Okay, we've got at least one college coach here. Fergal, you're here, and I'm curious to what the coaching team at Temple, what are you looking for in high school rowers that are are getting ready for college, and you like someone to come row for you? What are you looking for?
I think with COVID, it's been very interesting, especially the last freshman class and the one before that. I think it has become, and especially with Zoom, you're end up spending half your time on Zoom. And then it has became the urge. The race results aren't out there. Like last year, not a lot of regattas happened. So you've had to get to know the kids a little bit more. And normally it was on the phone. Now you're getting to know kids face to face. But in the same on that, it's still a lot to do with the erg, because we didn't have race data. Normally you can kind of like, if you made somebody's 1V, you kind of know where they were, if they're in the 2V, same kind of idea. Last year, we didn't have that information on guys. So it became very interesting. And I think in the same way, there's been a shift even towards, I feel like club rowing, even since I've moved to America, has gotten way, way bigger. It's like, so even from where it would have been like Temple primarily would have been a lot of Philadelphia, kids from Philadelphia who like rowed for Phil, or rowed for Bonner, like rowed for Prep, came to Temple. Now we're getting guys from Florida, Texas, all over the country. So I think the map has gotten bigger in terms of where guys are coming from. We're like, it would have been like Temple, but I think a lot in general, a lot of guys would have came from Philly. But I think rowing throughout the whole of the States has grown massively. And we can see that. It's even in Florida and Texas are the big ones that we can see. So many rowing teams are just emerging.
Thanks. Well, I have another question. Would some of the coaches, you guys just mentioned, Amy just mentioned that an additional move, and Leslie talked about just sculling. Is there opportunities to scull in college? When you talk to the kids about sweep versus scull, are there opportunities growing in college for that?
So the IRAs hasn't made any headway with this. The Dadvilles, to their credit, has added a single and a double event, and they've added a quad. So this past year, we have a single and we bought 2 doubles that can also go as pairs, but it was that down the road that if the Dadvilles makes this a thing, that we're going to be ready for it. But at the IRA's level, they're still behind. To be honest, the sculling probably isn't going to pick up in the collegiate level. I think the NCAA and universities administration care about putting seats in the 8. But the Dadville, to their credit, has made a push for it. They're, like Leslie said, they've put their money where their mouth is and made it an event that is for, they've made a single, they've made a double, and now they have a quad.
Can I
Go
say
ahead, Molly.
something?
Yeah, after Molly, I want to say something too about this.
It's interesting when you look at sculling. We started sculling at Episcopal because the Interlac women added a quad event to their championship, which has since been disbanded thanks to Haverford School. But we went into sculling because of that. And so there was an 8 event and a quad event, and we decided, well, if we're going to try to win the quad, right, you gotta row the races that are part of your league championship. And the thing that presents is it takes more coaching, right? And not that sculling's harder or the technique's different, but if you're going to have sculling, you have to have a coach that's with them. They're blind boats. They're blind boats, and blind boats on the Schuylkill at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's right.
It's really tough. It's very tough. And you can't just send out singles. I know people do. You can't just send out singles and say, make it to the top of the river in March when the water is 41 degrees. I mean, so that's probably one of the things that the colleges are dealing with. I mean, it's just hard. If you have a big team, to think of putting 1 billion people out in singles, you just don't have the supervision to do that safely. John, sorry, I didn't mean that dig at you. It's just when they combine the girls Interact League and the men's Interact League.
I wish rowing had a voice at those AD meetings. Let's just say that.
we don't say anything, but that's when it that championship was dissolved.
I want to add something about sculling and college rowing. I think that if you have a sculling background, let me see, am I talking here? Yeah. If you have a sculling background, it helps you in college. And I have a personal story about one of my own kids who walked on for the Harvard lightweights, and they had some recruits, and it was freshman year, and they were filling out the freshman boat at the time, and the recruits got in the boat, and then they said, well, who else are we going to put in the first boat for the first few practices? And how many guys here have rowed before? And it's Harvard, so there's a lot of guys who rowed before. Half of them raised their hands, and then they said, well, that doesn't narrow it down. And then they said, how many guys have sculled? And only a few raised their hand, including my son. And that's how he got in the first boat at the first day of practice, which he called me up that night, and I can't tell you how excited he was. But because I think that a lot of college coaches see that sculling is a very valuable skill to have. It's very versatile. It focuses on technique. So even though you may go to college and not scull, I think that sculling is a great background for kids to have in high school.
Yeah,
that's my about that.
Yeah, and go back to Alan's point and Leslie's point. I think, as Leslie talked about, for a college coach's point of view, when a kid can take it upon themselves to start their own rowing team and row their single in the Stotesbury or the Flicks, they're the kids we want. Like somebody who finds a sport and takes it upon themselves to be proactive. They're the kids you want, 9 out of 10 times.
So, Jen, we have a guy here he's not from Philly, but he's from Florida, and his team is comprised of virtually all scholars. So, Tom, can you briefly tell us how those kids do as far as getting into college? You're muted, Tom. You're muted.
How's that?
That's better.
All right. Actually, I am from Philadelphia and started at Father Judge High School, and we back when the program started in 1963. But to answer your question, I still believe that scholars are the cream of the crop, and as far as our kids getting into college, right now a scholar that we had who won won a regional championship for us in sculling is in the 5 seed at the University of Washington's Big 8, and we've had some really good history of some of our athletes, both on the men and the women's side, getting scholarships. Women even more successful in Division I programs. So yeah, I'm a fan of sculling, and you know, Jim Dietz and I have talked about this many times over the years. We were actually sparring partners when I was in high school, and continue to talk. And now we're talking about coastal rowing, which once again is sculling, whether it's in a single, a double, or a quad. It's open to both men and women, and it will be an Olympic sport in 8 years or so. Recently in the Philadelphia area, let's say an hour away from you, I've actually helped them start an organization called South Jersey Coastal Rowing. And there's going to be 6 coastal boats that'll be at the Jersey Shore this summer. So lots of things going on in that category, but always remember that that's sculling. If you know how to scull, you can learn how to negotiate the small waves and do the turns and things like that. But the scullers are going to be the champions in that type of a sport.
And Barb, you're sculling too, aren't you?
We scull in the fall. So according to John Monahan, I'm one of the first coaches to start getting quad riggers for all of our fours. I'm just a big fan of sculling. I agree with what John Hooten said to me, you know, learning a single and you can do anything from there. I believe in the balanced development of kids. So we scull in the fall. I like to think I had something to do with supporting the idea of having Cox quads in the Schuylkill and the head of the Charles, you know, and then for better for worse, we flip back to our fours in the spring because we don't have any straight boats to enter. I don't think there are any Cox quad events in the spring. So, you know, we do both, but I'm a huge fan of sculling.
Thanks.
Mike,
So,
I see that John Quinn is on our call. And although he's got Philadelphia ties, he also has ties up in the Boston area. And I'd be interested to know if John has the schools up in that Boston area share the same kind of issues that we have down in Philadelphia.
John, unmute, please.
Unfortunately, at the present time, referees in the Boston area, at least where I work, do most of my work, which is on Lake Quinsigamon, do not have a lot of association with high school crews. They seem to want to run their own program, and they do a lot of their own officiating and things like that. Although with our grandkids, from our grandkids' backgrounds with other sports, I share the opinions of that have been said so far about there's a lot of things that are pulling kids in other directions. And I share your sympathy. From our perspective, we don't do a lot of refereeing. The licensed referees in this area don't do a lot of refereeing with the high school programs. Now, we will at the championship level, and I'm working that one also at the NERRA, New England Interscholastic Rowing Association, at the end of May. And I'll be working this weekend with the guy who's chiefing that, and that's on Lake Quinsigamon also. So they come together at the high school championship level, but not at the preparatory boats. programs and regattas. Going back quickly to one comment that was made about sculling, I think a few of you might know our daughter Kelly, who rode for Notre Dame High School in Lawrenceville, and we bought her a single. And she went on to row at Mercyhurst, and she rode heavyweight, lightweight, port and starboard, only because she had scull. And she jumped from one side of the boat to the other side of the boat with equal facility, and was very valuable to them. So that's my input.
Well, that was good, John. Thanks. So, anybody else have anything they want to add to it? So, hey, Phil, I got a quick question for you. How many years have you been coaching?
Probably too many. 52.
52.
Yes.
Congratulations, man. That is a hell of a
10
record.
years less than Molly.
It's a good thing you're on Zoom.
It is. She would reach
But
right through. the
Molly's very
screen.
kind, though. So
She is kind.
yes. And Joan, here, one quick one for you. How many years have you been a referee?
Unmute, Joan.
Joan, mute. Mute.
Mute.
Uh-oh, where'd she go?
I don't think she wants to tell you, Mike.
Apparently longer than I've been.
You know what? I think you're right, Rich. Never ask a woman anything like
Hey,
that.
Mike, ask me the same question.
How long have you been a referee?
As of this coming July, 55.
Wow.
There you go.
5.
Yep. As an American referee. 30 is FISA.
Huh.
Okay, now I'm back.
Wow. Oh, there we go, Joan.
I had to find it first. You got to remember, I started rowing in 1950 and 51.
Huh.
Oh, yeah. So I've been around a long time. Got away from it, went to college, got back to Philadelphia in the 70s. So I started refereeing in the early 70s. And I was licensed by NAAO also. My membership number is 258. So
yeah, and you?
I go back a long way.
Yeah, well, thank you for all your work doing that.
I'll be here again
I
in May
mean that.
I'll be back in May to do everything then, and once again in October to my favorite city, Philadelphia.
Looking forward to see you.
I'd love it
Thank
back.
Philadelphia certainly has a attraction for a lot of referees around the country. They love to come into the city, and they seem to have ties in Philadelphia area and develop friendships and bonds with other referees that are in the area as well. Has something to do with our city, I think.
I was born next to the river in East Falls.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
It's in your blood.
exactly.
You know, somebody had said something about the association that, that we have with rowing. I know, Molly, you said it, that, many people have said it here about how you get to spend more time with kids than their parents do. That, when you first hear that, it sounds shocking, but truly looking at it, it's true.
True.
And I know myself from just following through. After I stopped coaching, I started steering boats more. And so the club that I belong to has high school rowers rowing out of it. That's Molly's group. And we have collegiate group. We have LaSalle University rowing out of Fairmount. But we also have a bunch of masters. And one of the things that never ceases to amaze me is,
Can I pull you back? I'm in the middle of the Zoom.
I get into a boat and I have a guy in the 7 seat that I taught him how to row in 1986. And then I got another guy in the 4 seat who he was a freshman in '85 and stuff like that. And these guys are still out there and they're in their 50s and they're still rowing. It's really, where else can you do it? It's the greatest thing. So anyhow, Jen, what do you think?
No, any final thoughts or questions? Any takeaways anybody wants to leave us with?
Yeah, there's Jinx.
Well, it's an honor to sit amongst all the coaches and the referees here. I have a quick question about one of the personalities on the row. When I started rowing in 1963, shortly, one of my very first outings in a single, I fell in the river right off, not too far off of the Girls Rowing Club dock. And I was rescued by the coach, a coach out of Tennessee. I believe his name was Jack Galloway, but I can't remember what and I thought it was high school, but I can't remember what group it would have been and if he's even around anymore. Anybody know?
Yeah, I do know Jinx. Jack is he's like the director emeritus of the Dad Vale Regatta. He's still involved, so he'll be around Dad Vale time. And if Jack pulled you out of the water, he must have been having a good day. Otherwise, so, and you had didn't you say Tom Rafferty at one other call when you guys were talking about your crew?
Yes. Yeah.
And
Rafferty and Bindo. Yeah. Tom Rafferty and Vince Bindo. Yeah.
they were Phil Roche's coaches when he went to judge. So he learned from the finest.
They were distinct personalities.
It's a shame they're not around anymore. And Paul, I remember when I started rowing at Bonner, I was a sophomore, and you were the stroke and the captain of the LaSalle College team at the time. And he was the biggest guy I ever saw, and he was rowing. And now I bump into Paul and I say, "What happened? I didn't get that much taller." So we're getting closer to each other.
That's great. Any other final thoughts?
Just one final thought, please.
Sure.
Chip gives us advice to everybody that he meets that is coaching. If you have to coach somebody, coach orphans.
And I want to congratulate Chip on a job well done. And everybody else too.
I have a final thought though, but just to the point of scholastic and high school rowing, I think we all keep in mind that it really doesn't exist without the parents, even though all the consternation they bring to the table. And I'm sure the coaches would rather not have to deal with a lot of that stuff and be able to independently run their teams. But they do make it happen. They do provide a lot of the financing and support. So we can't get away from them. It's a necessary evil. And I think in many cases, it's good to see that the parents and young people kind of on the same page as these kids are growing up.
That's great. Thank you, Rick. All right. Well, thank you all for participating in tonight's talk.
One more, Jen.
Oh yeah, sure.
Amy?
I was just going to say, I think this is such a great thing that you brought together, that we've been trying to work on communication amongst the coaches and and to build more of a relationship so that we're all working together instead of, kind of glaring at each other. So I'm really glad that we're all working together and we're all talking and the communication lines are completely open. So thank you everybody for being here and allowing me to be part of this.
Well, thank you. And that's a good comment, Amy, because I think that's, we're looking at the cream of the crop here. And everyone that has the same line of thought about, communication and working together and, what we're trying to instill in those high school rowers. So I think, kind of take that and spread it as much as possible. I think I had my, 2 years ago, I was coaching for the first time a daughter of someone that I coached in high school. So it's fun to see the generations come through. I'm actually coaching more now on the Little League field, and I am hell-bent on bringing a lot of what we take from rowing onto the baseball diamond. So there. Some of the concepts that are kind of second nature, I think, to rowing coaches and rowers. You find that it's not so much in other sports, and I think as much as we can be a part of spreading that, the better for sport in general. So thank you to Mike. You did a great job in facilitating tonight's conversation. Thank you to all our storytellers on board this evening, and to our Committee 50 for pulling together another great story hour, and to each of you for investing your time with us this evening. We will post this recording on our YouTube site, and I'll send a direct email to each of you once it's posted, and that way if you want to share it with others. This is such a huge topic, and if you have ideas or thoughts on topics you'd like to see us talk about, or even just delving into one small portion of this very large topic, we'd love to hear from you. So don't be afraid to reach out and let us know your thoughts. And hopefully you'll join us in May for our next story hour. We are going to be celebrating the anniversary of Title IX. So more to come on that. All right. So good night, everybody. Stay safe, stay warm. Enjoy that spring weather when it comes, and good night.
Good night, Jen. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
you.
Hey, good night, everybody.